not surprising then that Caesarea becomes a major place for the growth of Christianity. Makes sense, right? Two early church fathers that are very important to early church history are here in Caesarea. One of them is Origen. How many of you have heard of Origen? Who started out in Alexandria down in Egypt, but then came here and taught at a school here. Okay, and then he lived here for a long time, and so we have Origen's accounts. For example, if you lived here, wouldn't you go? You're going to go to Bethlehem here while Origen went to Bethlehem, and so we have his early account in the 3rd century of seeing where Jesus was born. That's one example. After Origen dies, not long after Origen dies, by the way, Origen was persecuted and tortured for his faith and died a few years after, but it was from the injuries that he suffered from that. And then we have another. Origen is known as for his theology and for his apologetics. His work against census was one of his early works. But then we have Eusebius. And how many of you have heard of Eusebius? Often called the father of church history. Right? If it wasn't for Eusebius, we wouldn't know an awful lot that we do, because he sat here. He was from. He's ruling as a bishop here in Caesarea. He's in a library copying things. And a lot of previous sources that he copied we wouldn't know of if he hadn't copied them himself. Okay, and so I have Eusebius, the church history, one of his writings here, and being a local of Caesarea and having his writings, I thought it would be interesting to look at some of the descriptions that he has. Now, he's living here in the end of the 3rd century into the beginning of the 4th century. Okay? Martyrdoms at Caesarea. Okay, so again, he's not writing as somebody who's distant from these things. He's right in the heart of it. It says this, 3 prominent confessors of Christ at Caesarea in Palestine were also crowned with martyrdom by becoming food for wild beasts. And then it gives their names, Priscus, Malchus, and Alexander. One thing we have to keep in mind here is another thing that this hippodrome was used for, and that was persecuting the early church. So imagine these seats full of people, not just cheering a chariot race, but cheering these 3 guys getting torn to pieces by these wild animals. Here's another one at Caesarea. At Caesarea in Palestine, a guy named Marinus, honored with high rank in the army, so he was Roman, and also prominent through birth and wealth, was beheaded for his witness to Christ in the following way. Then it tells his story. Now, one reason I think this is very interesting, I'm going to read his story, is that this guy's just like Cornelius, right? He's part of the Roman military and high-ranking and confessing Christ. So it says he was a Christian that did not sacrifice to the emperors. It says this came to light, and the judge first asked what opinions Marinus held, and when he saw that he steadfastly confessed his Christianity, he granted him 3 hours to reconsider. So he goes off, reconsiders for 3 hours. He comes back. Just as he was returning, a herald announced that the time had expired and summoned him to the court. Standing before the judge, he showed still greater fervor for the faith. He was immediately led off to execution and so found fulfillment. Let me read a few more. Okay, so under this also happened here under the aforementioned rulers. A certain man was brought into a public place in order to sacrifice. When he refused, he was hoisted up naked and lashed with whips until he should give in. Since even this failed to bend him, they mixed salt and vinegar and poured it over his lacerations of his body, where the bones were already protruding. When he scorned these agonies too, a lit brazier was applied, and the rest of his body was roasted by the fire as if meat for eating. Not all at once, lest he find too quick a release, but little by little. Still he clung immovably to his purpose, and expired triumphantly in the middle of his tortures. Such was the martyrdom of one of the imperial servants, who was truly worthy of his name, Peter. Here's another one. Now I want you to imagine this. I know this might be horrifying some of us, but it's always important, I think, to understand a place. You got to understand the good with the bad. If you don't understand the bad and the hard things and the problem, then you don't understand. Then we have a hard time understanding the solution. Okay, so imagine this going out here. Which, by the way, none of the people going through here today are probably being told this happened here. Women were tied by one foot and swung high in the air, head downward by machines, their bodies totally naked without a stitch of clothing, the most shameful, cruel, and inhumane of all spectacles for onlookers. Others died fastened to trees. They bent down their strongest branches by machines, fastened one of the martyrs' legs to each, and then let the branches fly back to their natural position, instantly tearing apart the limbs of their victims. This went on not for a few days, but for some whole years. Sometimes 10 or more, at times more than 20 were put to death, or 30, or almost 60. At other times, 100 men, women, and little children were condemned to a variety of punishments and killed in a single day. Now listen to this. I myself saw some of these mass executions. In that time in between, when Peter is here with Cornelius, between that time and when that temple becomes a church, we're talking mass persecution during that time. It wasn't not by blood, right, that transformation took place, starting with the blood of Jesus, of course, as the foundation, but also the blood of many believers. And he describes, as we would expect, there were many also that denied and weren't killed. In fact, one of the issues after the persecutions had ended, and when did they end? They ended with Constantine. Constantine was already ruling the West at the time, but he won a decisive battle here for the East in 324 AD, and it was under Constantine that those persecutions finally came to an end. He didn't jump in there and immediately make the Christianity the official belief system of the empire, but he made it legal, and he favored it. And so from, we'll call it Peter and Cornelius to Constantine, a lot of persecution, a lot of blood. The ones who denied the faith, one of the questions when Constantine came is, what